Okay, Luca, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Of course, of course. So before we jump in and dive into everything Oasis and all the different things that you guys are doing, tell me a little bit about yourself. What's your story, your background? How did you get into this space?
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to. It was it goes back to 2013 when I was working for a company in the financial services space. I was an intern there. It was my first job after having started my own company, and while researching about different like financial products or maybe being curious about the financial system in general, I came across this thing called Bitcoin from a newspaper. And that thing was in the bottom right corner. They were talking about this thing, Bitcoin. They didn't know what that was, but the news was that this Bitcoin moved from like a few cents to like $300, and that part was kind of like unexpected and questioned by the newspaper. And I remember being attracted by that because I was very intrigued by the idea that few people, or at least some few people, um, believed in the same thing up to the point of buying and selling something that didn't have any value for probably 99.9% of the people. And I said, there must be something in it. So if some people are betting on this somehow, there must be something. So I went to my vice presidents and I said, listen, like, can I spend some time researching in my own time, let's say, researching about this Bitcoin? And they told me like, not really. We looked at that a little bit. We don't want to spend time in it. And frankly, I trusted them because they had 20, 30 years of experience in the payment space. And I thought they must have seen like many of those things. And this is where I was wrong because this wave of decentralization, this ability of avoiding double spending in a digital way, etc., was really the first time, but I didn't spend any time thinking of those consequences back in time. I kept working in the corporate space in product roles at American Express, Procter and Gamble, Google most recently. But when I then moved to California for an MBA, that's the moment where I really spend time understanding the technology behind Bitcoin, and then consequently like the smart contract of Ethereum and in general like the blockchain aspects. I think it was the perfect environment and the perfect timing for dedicating time to an innovation that was supported both from the technology standpoint and from the investment standpoint. And then I started appreciating how blockchain could really change and improve some of the aspects or verticals where I've been involved in the past at that point, right? So having worked in product, often in data related functions, I had always seen the struggle between using the data and securing the data that companies face almost on a daily basis. I remember being very curious about this idea that maybe like an analyst based in some geography in the world receives a request from Luca, being a new employee at company X, asking to give him access to some tables of the company in exchange of some lines that explain like why I needed that access. And I said, like, this feels weird. Like, why there is this process that doesn't really add any layer of guarantee for the company. And so I thought there must be a way to secure the data using blockchain, and in a way that still allows people to run computation that they want. So in other words, like an easier way to say this, there must be a way to use the data while protecting the data. Mm-hmm. And I started doing some researches, and I came across this Berkeley professor called Don Sung, who is an expert in like cryptography, blockchain, deep learning, and other very complicated aspects. And yeah, we got in touch. it turned out that she was working on something very similar. So she just released the first white paper of what would become Oasis not long after. And yeah, we ended up like funding a lot of synergies. So I joined her project, and 2.5 years later, I'm still in the same place in the same company, having built a decentralized network from scratch, having abstracted a lot of these aspects to serve these aspects to developers, and having engaged enterprises and having experienced how these enterprises start thinking about blockchain in the context of like data and protection.
Very cool. Very cool. You said you got into it back in like 2013. So like, was it like Bitcoin that got you excited like around that time that made you want to get into the space? Because I remember Bitcoin, that's like the first time it had its run up to like what, $1,200, $1,300, and everyone was freaking out. Oh, look at this digital currency. It's a tulip mania. This will never ever happen again. What a unique circumstance. I remember so many people getting in around that year.
That's exactly right. So given that I was back in Europe, I'd say I wasn't really surrounded by people who got in at that time. I remember talking about it a lot to my friends, but like no one really like put the money in this thing. I remember buying like 3 Bitcoin back in time at $300. Now the thing is, having this is another thing that pushed me to like DeFi, and we could talk more about this, but it's like when I talked to my family back in time, I told them like, hey, I bought this thing, I paid $300, and now it's up to 2,000. I think that was the first like bull run that I remember. And they were like astonished that they thought I was doing something illegal or something really bad to have that type of return, because when it comes to their own experience with banks and some level of investment products, when they get something that is above like 3, maybe 4%, they start being very skeptical about what the underlying like product is. And they told me that is definitely a scam. So like, think about it. Like I was first timer into this, like these things, like not just Bitcoin, but even investing. And I have on the one hand, I have a VP at a big company that tells me like, don't play with those things. And I have my family telling me the same thing. Those are all people who had like 20, 30 years of experience in whatever they are doing. And I tended to like trust them, no questions asked. So I ended up selling, making like some little money. But this is one of the things, like this idea that there is a common misconception in the space, that whenever you get 3-4%, it's absolutely high. I think it's wrong. I think it's driven by central entities, and I do think that there is a chance for doing something better with decentralized finance.
Very cool. Yeah, decentralized finance is a really interesting area that seems to be gaining a hell of a lot of attraction lately in the space, just because of all the things it can do in terms of providing liquidity and collateralized loans and a whole gambit of things. Like there's just a whole range of stuff that it can touch.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very broad, and I think when I first got into DeFi, maybe it was a couple of years ago, I remember being very excited about seeing $500 million locked in DeFi protocols. Basically, everything was like Maker, and I think Compound was starting to grow in that space. And now it's pretty impressive. The size is way bigger. I think it's 28 billion if I remember the number correctly. And yeah, that is like absolutely astonishing. The counter argument to these that I care about is that I think that the way to go is still very long. And what I mean by that is I think it's pretty different to attract risk, like people with very high risk preference and tolerance as crypto traders, and then attracting like the average person, the average person. So I want to be still down to earth, even if I see very positive numbers. I still think the DeFi needs to grow a lot. The DeFi space needs to grow a lot to be able to attract like those people and go to the next level. This is one of the main things that we try to work at Oasis. We try to focus a little less on the today's DeFi, and we keep having conversations about what's needed tomorrow.
What do you mean by today's DeFi? Like what is it that you guys see that DeFi is missing that it needs?
The use case of today's DeFi is very precise and very focused. There is a subset of the population which is crypto owners, crypto holders, who don't want to have their assets sitting idle in their wallets, and someone built a product for them, right? So you can do a lot of things with these assets. You can collateralize those assets and increase your position and go trade with that money. You can simply like lend and borrow. You can start paying. Maybe paying is not the main use case as of now, but like you can pay someone with the money especially if you want to like cross borders and avoid paying like crazy fees for doing that using your banks. But I think the main point of DeFi today is crypto owners and even crypto traders, right? Mm-hmm. Now, when I think of the gap that is between the crypto owner and the normal person, like the average person, there is definitely like a level of risk that separates these two people, the acceptance of the risk that separates these two people, right? Mm-hmm. First of all, like even if you put your money, like the person who puts money in crypto is a risk taker by definition of what that move entitles. And so like the tolerance for imperfect products, clunky user experience, no insurance, no protection, it's very high. But when you start thinking of the average person, all these things need to be there, right? And so when I think of tomorrow's DeFi, I start thinking of a system where you need to have a good and easy and clear enough user experience. You need to be able to offer some protection in case things go wrong, and the user doesn't have to understand what things need to go wrong. They simply want protection. They want like some level of guarantee in exchange maybe for lower returns. And they also want like something that resembles the usage of money. In the current generation, the usage of money is really transacting dollars, right? And so if it's not bills, it has to be like a number on your app. For the new generation, it may be natively digital, but still has to resemble that experience. And right now, like DeFi, it's heading there, but it's still very far.
Yeah, I mean, it's very early and there's a lot that it can, improve on. But I mean, it's very exciting too to watch because I know that how many people it can actually help. But let's dive in and talk about Oasis a little bit because I know it's got a little bit of complexity there, at least for me, because we were talking about how there's like the umbrella, there's like Oasis, and then you have Oasis Labs, Oasis Foundation, Oasis Network. So yeah, tell me a little bit about what Oasis is, and then what some of those branches are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Oasis started with the idea that blockchain. So Oasis started 2 years ago, first of all, 2.5 years ago, when blockchain had a very clear limitation, which was it's very slow, it's fully transparent, and the combination of these two elements, it's essentially creating an upper bound for blockchain adoption, because by definition, it's really not applicable for the masses. It's not usable by enterprises, and it causes some side effects that are not even productive for the current users of blockchain. Let me elaborate on this. So let's take DeFi because it's a good use case for blockchain. When you think of DeFi, you essentially have multiple use cases within the term DeFi, but generally speaking, you keep having this situation where someone has some assets and wants to get a higher return out of that asset, out of those assets. Now, the transparency of blockchain is something that was supposed to be a feature of blockchain itself. Mm-hmm. While one of the things that is becoming clear now is that what is really causing is two big side effects. The first one is that self-motivated traders can have a behavior that is good for them, but dangerous for everyone else. And the second side effect of this is that fees go up. Fewer people can benefit from the actual returns that blockchain can offer. And this is pushing the entire industry to offer this space called yield farming that has gotten to crazy returns, which we all know that are unsustainable and very far from what DeFi should be. Mm-hmm. The promise of DeFi is to be an open financial system that is accessible by everyone with a little bit more than a smartphone connection, the smartphone and an internet connection. What is really being is a product for a few people who want to get crazy returns out of their money. So I think it's important to distinguish the current stage of DeFi and the fact that it will start there with the second wave that it will be attracting more people. So Oasis is focusing on that. So going back to what Oasis is innovating into, Oasis has created a decentralized network, a layer 1 blockchain that offers the ability to write smart contracts that keep the data private and confidential without limiting the ability to use this data. This is the main point. So developers can write applications. Those applications can issue a sort of social contract with their users. And they're saying, you know what, the data can stay with you. We application don't have to see your data. You remain in control of your data and do whatever you want with that and decide who and when and why someone will have access to your data. And even when they will have access to your data, the data is not going to be transferred, but it's still going to be kept into a capsule that keeps the privacy of your data. We think this is very powerful because of many reasons. The most philosophical principle is that it will create a better relationship between users and companies, and it will enable what we love to call the responsible data economy, which is this concept where the data is not something that is traded in exchange of a user experience, which is the main component of the Web 2, where sure, you can protect your privacy by denying cookies, and you need to go and read a lot of TNCs to do that. Mm-hmm. Or you can avoid being on Facebook to protect your data, but then you miss the entire social experience, right? There's a big trade-off there. But from here, we can switch to a model where the data is no longer, as I said, traded in exchange of experience, but it's part of the relationship between you and the company. There is this concept where this concept that explains that companies in the very early stage, they tend to attract users by cooperating with them, by offering what users want. But as these companies grow, the marginal importance of the newest user goes down, right? Mm-hmm. And the contractual power that this user has is always lower, because if you are the user of Facebook number, 1 million, your importance is very high. But if you are user number 3 billion, maybe your importance is sort of relative, right? Mm-hmm. And this creates an incentive for these companies that have some platform role to deviate from the original agreement that they established with the users. And they tend to have these behaviors where they like exploit value from the users, causing the users to be in front of this trade-off between keep using the product and protecting their own information, values, etc. Now, we think this is wrong. We think that the Oasis network can solve this and can create this user control Web3, where users remain in control over their own information and decide who they want to collaborate with. And the companies will have to go an extra mile to create this positive relationship with their users. Whether this will happen by paying the user or by simply like offering privacy and leaving the user in control of their data so that they can port their data somewhere else. This is like the most interesting question. But I think the shift that we want to enable is this idea that data is not something that is simply traded in exchange of a user experience, but is something that is used as a factor of production. It's considered as a factor of production, hence should be somehow rewarded. And who's the owner of this data should benefit from that. Happy to go a little deeper on this, but I wanted to start from the more like philosophical aspect.
Yeah, gotcha. Is this designed more for a company to offer its client base, or is this designed more for the individual to take advantage of to get away from, all these centralized systems?
So this is a very good question, and I think in an ideal world that would be designed for the bottom layer of the internet, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I think the smart projects are the ones who not only design a vision for the future, but also design a path to get there. And this path needs to be aligned with what the current status of things is, right? Mm-hmm. So we think in the short term, the best way we will see this happening will be in this collaboration between companies and users. And we are seeing some of these, like we are working with a company that is adopting our solution that is helping their users who want to take genomics tests keep the data private without sacrificing the ability of running all the like computation on this data. So this company is called Nebula. The use case is public. And whenever you take a DNA test, instead of putting your data out there and not knowing what's going to happen like 20 years from now, the users will retain full ownership and control of their data. The data is private, even if it's analyzed and it's and the same report that you get in a public way, it's produced. We are seeing a similar example where that there is like the mortgage market where when you sign your mortgage, you need to give a lot of information to the players involved and you don't know what happens there then. But where you can keep your information private without sacrificing the ability of seeing for like running your risks model on your information. And we keep seeing like a lot of these use cases, exactly as I said, where effectively what the company wants to do is creating a better relationship with their users. So we think this is the first entry point of this responsible data economy. The second will be when more and more users, by the time more and more users realize that, or actually when more and more users realize that the data is valuable and having control over their data is like should be a human right. We think that the users will be started demanding this feature from their companies and consider that as the new standard. Once you get privacy, it's hard to get rid of that. It's simply like the hardest challenge is the other way around, like convincing people to value something that they are not used to value. But even when you look at Apple, they're doing an outstanding job at protecting users' privacy and making people aware that a more private world should be there.
Gotcha. So now I got a pretty good overview of, what Oasis is and what the vision is here. Do you guys have any use cases where, you've had individuals or groups, companies or projects, building something on the Oasis network, or is that still relatively new? Or yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's both, right? So it's both relatively new, and we are supporting many use cases already. So the two that I just described are real, are getting to production, so people can use it. A third that can come to mind is something produced by this company called the Music Fund, and they want to establish a better relationship for artists. And they want to compensate artists for their data. So what happens is that they take some of the data out of main like players such as Spotify, and they enable these artists to control their data and decide who they want to share the data with in exchange for some money.
When you talk about when you talk about like artist data, do you mean like their music or their creative work?
Yeah. It could be anything that they want. It could be anything that they want. It starts with like metadata associated to like a track, but it could go up to the actual piece of music as well. Now, so like the use cases that we support are really like many, and they come from different parts. We as Oasis we have a grant program to support this more early stage projects that grow into more mature stages, and so this is one effort that the company is doing. The second effort that the company is pursuing is on the decentralized finance aspect. That's why before I was keen to talk about that. On the blockchain side, we as a decentralized network, right? The Oasis network provides these developers the ability to offer some superior features to their own users, right? Scalability and privacy are the main two. And this component of the blockchain, of the Oasis blockchain, in addition to the data part that I just talked about, offers pretty compelling use cases that haven't been tackled yet, and that we are very excited to increasingly support via the features that the network releases and that the community votes to release, via the grants that the foundation is willing to offer, and via the marketing and marketing support that the Oasis team can offer. So, talking about DeFi a little bit more here, maybe one question that listeners have is, what is the relationship between data? How do these two stories around like the responsible data economy and the DeFi sort of merge together, right? And I think this is an interesting angle that it's going to take a little bit more time to realize, but it would be extremely powerful. And again, this requires an understanding of today's DeFi and tomorrow's DeFi. So today's DeFi, the main use case you pointed before is lending and borrowing, right? Mm-hmm. The current situation is that there is no reputation whatsoever in DeFi. You are a MetaMask wallet, and you can generate as many addresses as you want. And it's basically up to you to decide whether you want your history to be there, right? If you don't want your history to be there, you create a new address, which again, like if we want, we can still link to the previous one because at some point you need to transfer funds. But let's say that that's not the case, right? You create a new identity by creating a new wallet, and you go and do something on a protocol. So the protocol doesn't know anything about you and has no way to separate your good actions from your bad actions, which means that there is no way for the protocol to separate the good person from a bad person when it comes to the actions that this person takes. And in fact, how do you see this? Where do you see this being like obvious? In the fact that you need to over collateralize your loans, right? You need to over collateralize your position, which I think everyone in the world agrees that is not the most efficient way to do lending, but it's the only possible way to do it right now. So I hope from here you start appreciating how the data story and the DeFi story start converging, because if the user becomes the owner of the information, if the protocol needs more information about the user, these two stories start merging in a sense that the user can bring the financial information into a capsule that is owned by the user themselves. And when a user wants to use a certain protocol, the protocol can query this data in a privacy-preserving way, build a certain risk model, whether it's built by the protocol or by a decentralized protocol, like an additional decentralized protocol. We can discuss about that. But you can assess a risk profile of the user, because now you are sort of sure that the financial history of the user, whether it's on chain or off chain, is still in this one place, this data capsule. So you can build your own like risk model.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, you can start envisioning a way where still like the final interest rate, the overall average interest rate depends on supply and demand of how much money is available to be given out and how much money is asked. But maybe you can start thinking of a world where some users will get a lower interest rate and some other users will get a higher interest rate, depending on who they are and depending on how they behaved with different protocols. Again, the path there is not straightforward, and it still requires different entities to collaborate. It requires these protocols to start adopting some of these technologies. But even there, we are seeing an increasing demand for start collecting the state of a user, the state of the blockchain, or maybe just simply off-chain data into these user capsules. Like Chainlink is a partnership that we have, for instance, and the vision is exactly that one, right? Like taking this data that lives somewhere else and bringing it into a capsule that is owned by the user, and then putting this capsule, making this capsule available to like the lending protocol or the DeFi protocol in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that you guys are really thinking ahead on a lot of this stuff, especially from the DeFi perspective, because a lot of people are focused on the here and now, but you guys are thinking about, where you can take it, what people are going to need, and that stuff is going to make Oasis network a lot more competitive. When you have like Ethereum, for example, which is far more established, has been around a long time and is a first mover. So everyone's going to gravitate there naturally. It's important to think ahead, which is good that you guys are doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in 2021 and maybe 2022, you're going to see more collaboration between layer ones. As I said before, I think what's very interesting about good projects is the combination of a long-term vision and a short-term plan.
Mm-hmm. So
I don't expect this data tokenization, that's how we call it, and this like reputation system to happen overnight. The industry is still figuring out other pieces such as like adoption, user experience, on off ramp, adoption of stablecoin, and in fact you're seeing an explosion there. You're seeing like liquidity, like the need to attract more and more liquidity to serve younger and newer projects. So all these things will be like still the main themes for this year and I'd say the next year as well. But I think from these many layer ones, I don't expect these layer ones to be competitors. I expect these layer ones to be working together for two reasons. A, because liquidity right now and usage is on Ethereum, so you need to acknowledge that you need to start there. And B, because each network has some specific properties that everyone is interested in. Like Oasis network is very unique when it comes to privacy, when it comes to scalability, when it comes to the flexibility of its architecture. We can talk more about this if it's interesting. Mm-hmm. All the other layer ones have the same, have some properties that make them unique. And I think it's inevitable that this layer one will build bridges amongst themselves to enable what's getting more and more popular as a term, like cross-chain finance. So So I think this is very exciting because if you draw comparisons with the internet in the past, like you saw a lot of inefficiencies when it comes to these different networks that were born and grew up as different networks, and then at some point there was this need to collaborate via these protocols that didn't really like keep the state or were not really meant to do that. While blockchain is realizing this very early on. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple of years for the layer ones and for these applications, or maybe like for these protocols that will leverage everyone's properties and everyone's benefit to actually create a fantastic user experience that is not just like the UI, but it's also all the bottom layers. And the most interesting thing about blockchain, this is very clear by now, is the coordination and collaboration the blockchain can create around aligning the incentives of all the players of the stack. I think this will be a very exciting next couple of years for the blockchain industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on a bit of a time crunch today, so I'm going to ask one more question for us to kind of dive into here. But what do you think that Oasis has competition? And if so, how do you feel that it stacks up to that competition, and what does it bring to the table that said competition doesn't necessarily have?
Yeah, for sure. So definitely Oasis has competition, even though what I just said in the previous answer, I think still applies here, which is I don't think competition is the right way of seeing this. I think it's more of what are the unique properties and how these properties can be leveraged to serve other players that do similar things. Oasis stands out for the combination of scalability and privacy. So just to mention something there, scalability, there are like a lot of layer one projects that are tackling scalability in many different ways. On the privacy side, we are seeing a lot of these like privacy networks or privacy coins, and I think Oasis is the missing gap, fills the gap between these two worlds. So Oasis enables to combine the benefits of scalability and the benefits of privacy without being a privacy coin, without being private by default. So thanks to Oasis, developers can run smart contracts that keep the data private and confidential and support more complex workloads even in a scalable way. That's the cool part of that. So if you draw a chart where like you have on one axis the transactions per second and on the other axis something around the complexity of the transaction, Oasis tends to be like top right corner. And I think that's the property. So the best way would be for other networks to think of what maybe like transactions require this level of properties, which is like scalable and private at the same time. And maybe we can, maybe they can support, even if they want to be layer ones, maybe they can support some use cases via collaborating with Oasis network as a layer 1.5, let's say.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know on a project level that, most of you guys, everyone in this space, most people work together and collaborate. They're not trying to compete with each other. It's kind of a weird word to use in this space, but at the user level, they do look at it as competition. Like you see it every single day. Oh, is Ethereum going to outperform Cardano? Is EOS going to develop this versus Neo? Or, you see it all the time. So I guess in terms of competition, what I mostly meant was, from a user's perspective, are they going to see it as like a more popular place to go, a more practical place to go? Is it more usable? Does it work better? But yeah, on a project level, I know that everyone's pretty much working together, except for a few circumstances.
Yeah, the trade-off between speculators and users, it's always going to be there in the blockchain space, so it's not going to go. So I totally understand your point, meaning like people talk about which network is going to do better, which network is going to offer these properties, which network has certain features, etc. And they often looked at that from the lens of like buying the tokens and having some returns out of that, then I think this will
speculation and stuff like that.
Yeah, that part will definitely stay. But when we talk to application developers or protocol developers, the perspective is completely different. They are much more interested in what incentive they are. They have what features you offer, what's in your roadmap, how you're going to work with other networks, how you make the experience seamless for their users. How do they ensure that the network is going to be top of class maybe like a year from now? And so the set of questions tends to be like different. And I think like every blockchain project has some responsibility to serve both users, but the innovation and the level of collaboration between blockchain projects, I think, is the number one property of the blockchain industry as a whole. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that, because it really defines the way these projects keep going up, keep growing, keep attracting talent from other industries, keep attracting money from investors, keep attracting like developers who think of switching at least like part of their application to a decentralized world. Every week we talk to both like developers who are primarily focused on the blockchain space. But what's very interesting is that the Oasis network has been built with also like traditional developers in mind. When I say traditional, I mean like non-blockchain developers. And you can believe how frequent it is for these people to start thinking of ways to integrate blockchain for different purposes. Like yesterday, I had my last conversation with a company that is dealing with like medical records and wants to make this data controlled by the users available to like hospitals only if the user wants that. And they're thinking this company already built these mechanics in a centralized way, and they're thinking of adding a smart contract to like a piece of their own architecture to enable further decentralization and a better story with their users. And when we think when we think of this like 2 years ago, people were still asking why a blockchain? Why is it important? And I think that part now is starting getting like solved and clear to people. And so from an operator standpoint, the only thing we need to do is serving the best experience to these people who start realizing the value of blockchain. And that's what Oasis is doing. That's why Oasis works on the main network to make the like a network faster with these additional features. But the developer team is also focused on creating an abstraction for that. And so like you see the Oasis Labs arm that has built like APIs to abstract a lot of the complexity of blockchain. And so almost like a developer who wants to build something doesn't even know all the aspects of blockchain to start managing and dealing with blockchain. And we don't have time to talk about it, but the website explains this very, very clearly. So I encourage everyone who's interested either to reach out to the team, or to look at the website and the documentation there.
Cool. Yeah, I'm very excited about what you guys are doing with Oasis. It seems like a really awesome project and network, and it seems like it's going to be something that people are going to want to build on, going forward and utilize in the future. It's solving a lot of these issues. But we're going to wrap it up here just because of the stupid time crunch I'm on today. But Luca, thank you for, taking the time to come on and expand on what Oasis is and the network and how it works. Had some good topics on DeFi and cooperation versus competition in the space, and lots of cool topics. So this is going to be fun to cut up and share with my audience and the community. So again, thank you. Really appreciate it for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Anytime in the future, just let me know. Stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.